Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 173 of Justin the Food Entrepreneurs podcast. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro for anyone out there who wants to try to find me on Facebook or Instagram. It's at Justin Bizzarro on both Instagram and Facebook. You can also find us at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs. Welcome back, guys. I have Paul and Joe from Eagles Catch from Iowa. How are you guys doing? I think we left you guys at... We were just starting to talk about buckeye fish and how you guys came together on Paul's farm and started barramundi, I believe, was the fish. So let's start there and let's talk about how you guys came together. What were the first steps of moving into this turkey shed or whatever, a sheep shed or building?
Yeah, so when I first started looking into the opportunity of raising fish, the acreage that I live on had a turkey barn that was used for range turkeys back in the 70s and 80s. And I use it for raising my sheep in. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for my kids to have an opportunity to come back to the farm as an opportunity to raise livestock. Now, I don't have 1,000 acres of row crop that my kids can come back to and earn a living with. We do have livestock, cattle and sheep, and a few pigs, but there was nothing that was going to be sustainable for multiple families to live off of. It's definitely a hobby. So I was looking for an avenue for my kids, if interested in coming back to agriculture, that they would have an opportunity to do so. And then, long story short, I was told to talk to Joe and be able to pick his brain on what he was doing on the barramundi side of things and what he was doing as starting a fish farm from scratch. So that's kind of where I came into talking to Joe. Like I said, that was probably my best sales job I've ever done, is actually getting into Buckeye Fish Company and talking with Joe and the Plagueys and allowing them for me to come in to that company. And then we brought another family farmer in to be able to double the size of it and before we even started.
So did you actually build it in the range turkey shed?
Yeah, no.
Or barn?
No, that would have been a catastrophic idea to do. So Joe had opportunity and ideas and the vision on where to build it, how to build it, and go from ground up, more or less.
So let's talk about that then. So you've now all come together. You have the group. All of you are entrepreneurs in your own right, and now you've got to get the group to come together. And basically, you're going to almost greenfield a project is what we're saying here. So let's talk about how you go about that. How do you figure out where to start, the size of it? I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah. So essentially, when Paul sat down with us, myself and the Plaguey family, which is they're from the Clear Lake area, Clear Lake, Iowa, and they're a big farm family. And what our intention was is, there was a gentleman that we knew that had an off-the-shelf aquaculture system. And so he was going to sell us the system. He's going to come in and show us how to build it. He had the price point. He supplies everything.
Dream come true, right?
Yeah, exactly. And all we had to do was the building, and then we were going to work with this other farm. And so when Paul came in, and he really wanted to be a part of the project. I think the words you used the words that we use is like, look, there's going to be some bumps and scrapes along the way. And what Paul told me is, I want to be a part of the bumps and scrapes. And I want to learn, when you're in those early times, you're taking arrows and you're making mistakes and learning lessons. He wants to be a part of that. And so from our perspective, we've got this 12-tank system. And so there's baseline overhead that you have to acquire to build this system, like a well, a forklift, these kinds of things. In doubling the size of the project, we were spreading that overhead over more tanks. So it's like, if we got to hire, Joe, and we got to hire one other person, it doesn't matter if we're running 12 tanks or 24 tanks, and we only got to buy one forklift and those kinds of things. It's like, well, this makes sense. let's double the size of the project. We can spread the overhead, potentially a faster payback period, and those kinds of things. So it worked really well. My brother was an engineer at the time for a company in Iowa, and we went to work on the building itself, trying to contain moisture and all these other things. And we worked with the general contractor to build the farm. We put it on a piece of property that have been my parents. My grandpa actually bought this property in 1947, and so here we were going to build a fish farm on it, and so we built this long building, and for whatever reason we got delayed, and then we didn't start construction until October. Now winter's moving in. We have the coldest November like on record for like the last 20 years. And it was just one nightmare after another. And I remember one night, Paul and I were blowing insulation because the construction crew wasn't working fast enough for us. So we were like, all right, let's jump in there. And New Year's Eve night, I remember Paul and I, we blew insulation till 4 in the morning trying to get ahead of, the other cold that was coming in. And that was during that time, we were working 110-hour weeks trying to get this whole system put together. The guy did come to show us how to put the tanks together. We got 24 tanks. He showed us on one. He said he was going to help out with at least 6 to 8, but he showed us on one. He's like, I'm getting out of here. It's way too cold. He lives in Florida. He's like, I can't stay here. And it was so cold. And so we built out this system, and it was a great experience, a great introduction into a fish production system. And since it was an off-the-shelf, we didn't have to do the sort of creative design side of the technology and everything that goes into it, and which has, of course, been bigger and bigger part of what we're doing. And that kind of led into a different arrangement with our the other farmers that were in the area that kind of led to a point where we decided to exit the business.
Okay. And so you've exited. Both of you.
So I should probably give some context to that exit too. So when we were in the build process, they had, we like these guys, we trust these guys. They're hardworking, honest Iowa dudes, and so they decided that they were going to bring in an investor that was from Texas. They had all this money. They're going to bring in Trace Atkins to be their spokesman. They're going to do all these great and wonderful things. And pretty quickly, we liked and trusted these Iowa guys, so we're gonna play ball with these guys, and they wanted to take this and just blow this up to a crazy degree, and we had our first conversation with them, and we're like, wow, we really hit the jackpot here. We were at the right place, right time.
Of course, always.
The whole bit, and they're going to bring in this financing. We're going to get like 1,000% ROI, and all this other stuff, and so after about 6 months, our kind of continued conversations with them, and even though we liked the guys that they had gotten in business with from an investment standpoint, we weren't quite comfortable with the other guys because we were looking at kind of the baseline financial assumptions that they were bringing to the table, and we just said, I don't think these are realistic. And they were based off of their production assumption, those kinds of things. We started to get kind of uncomfortable, and we also knew that we hadn't gotten a production contract, we hadn't gotten anything in writing with them. There was a lot of resistance, and so finally, we at a meeting between all the families that were involved with the Buckeye Fish Company, we kind of just said, it started as a joke. It was like, well, maybe we should just sell it to them because we're not sure what we're going to get out of this. We're not sure if they're even going to be able to supply us the fish, and that kind of put us between a rock and a hard place. So it started as a joke. So why don't we just sell it to them? And then we're like, oh wait, maybe we should do that. Like that makes a lot of sense. So we did end up offering it to them, and they took our first offer, and it's like, oh, should ask for more money.
Yeah,
but,
no, always. Yeah, that's that one too. Damn it.
But and so then that summer they actually took over the farm and rented it from us for a while, for about a year before they closed. They were working on their own financing, and so after a year they closed, and history kind of proved that we were right about the financial assumptions, and It was really unfortunate for the community because they did end up going bankrupt, and their former management had been sued for securities fraud. Because
Oh,
when
wow.
we talked about when we talked about those financial assumptions that we didn't really believe in, that kind of came down to the money that they ended up raising, and we were thankful that we were able to exit and unscathed and actually with a little bit of money in our pocket. But we really believed in what we were doing, and we really believed in the opportunity. It's just we hadn't connected the dots
Absolutely.
in the way that the dots needed to be connected. And so at that point kind of was the nexus for the start of Eagle's Catch, and using everything that we had learned from production technology to building structures to marketing and everything else that goes into a business. And we said, all right, we've learned some lessons. Now let's take this and go do what and connect the dots in our own way, in a way that we think is really going to make a long-term opportunity for our community.
Yeah, and I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, the gut thing, we don't trust it. I don't think people in general do or trust it. I think it's kind of schooled out of us a little bit, to make us conform a little bit, just because that's what we have to do to fit into society and be successful. It's the way things are. We're an entrepreneur, we have to do a lot of gut checking. What is my gut saying?
Yep.
And sometimes you don't like what your gut's saying, and oftentimes when we make mistakes, it's not that we didn't know, it's really that we didn't trust our gut. Because in our lives as an entrepreneur, just like we were conditioned as kids, the arrows or the scars or with the battle wounds have conditioned us to have internal alert systems. At least in my experience, and the longer and more I stay attuned to what those are, or my reactions, or if I'm nervous, or all of a sudden I get anxiety, like I'm very in tune. It almost magnifies to a point I can't stand it. If I'm or starting to get near someone that's starting to make me uncomfortable, it'll literally drive me an anxiety out of the room. Like my body's like, dude, what are you doing here? Like you need to fact check this. What is in it for you? What's in it for the business? What are the negative things? But it's the ability to make the decisions and then make them quickly, if you want to exit or a partnership goes bad. And the other thing, when people raise money, I think it's an interesting thing how they often attach that to the people with credibility, but then use that to do things in poor nature, especially people that are trying to raise money to benefit themselves, versus the entrepreneur who we know you can raise money and yes, it helps, but if you're not in there installing 24 kits, because most likely the guy sold you 8, but he's really going to do 1. I mean, every piece of equipment almost in our building was a week of training. We're lucky if we got 12 hours the first day.
Right.
Lucky. And so, that being said, that is part of being an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur, like the farm, to this other point, you can buy a business. You can buy anything. But getting into farming in the first place, you had a background in it. And that is part of that tribal knowledge that gets pushed down from generation to generation. And I'll just be straight up, in the generation that's coming, it's often like, okay, we're going to also teach you how to manage us in our generation. Well, here's the thing about that. You've lost all the tribal knowledge that you got in the small communities, that you don't get in the big cities or even at the universities anymore, because the classes are too big and now we're behind screens. And so what is it that's happening without the interaction or the growth that really is beyond the classroom? You don't have home ec, you don't do electric anymore, you don't do plumbing. Most humans can't even frickin' hit a nail into a board anymore. And so it's like, how do you get those skill sets? For me, it's like just to be like a Renaissance man, just like function like a modern human male that I feel like I need to be not because I'm egotistical, but because I'm like, oh, I need to feel good. Like I should be able to take care of the basic necessities to survive, to protect myself and my family, or take care of us financially. Okay. Or be able to get myself out of a crisis with my own hands. So that's the thing that I think we've sort of thrown out and the other generations don't realize and that we've entitled them to is, yeah, you're entitled to it. What does it matter? Tradition, culture, like we're sort of just throwing it to the wayside, flag, whatever, I don't care. I'm being extreme, but it's like, it's the same thing we talk about. So often we get into business relationships where people have conditioned the entitlement. What does it matter if I exaggerate this a little bit? It's not going to harm anyone, but really it does harm people. But they never got the tribal knowledge to know it was wrong in the first place or have the moral and ethics to make the decisions because it's no longer, yes, I stick up for the police officer, or yes, I stick up for the teacher disciplining the kid and you need to learn the lesson. It's more like, oh, you did that to my kid. What's your problem? Okay, well, we just missed the function of the world completely on being successful outside of just whatever. So it makes it hard when they get into the business environments or entrepreneur environments like ours, and there's a higher standard by which you got to operate. So it makes partnerships hard. It makes doing business with vendors hard. It makes doing business with farmers hard sometimes. In our case, it takes a certain type of human to be entrepreneurial and to know what you have to go through and what you've been through. And when the person doesn't display that I've been through the frickin' battle, you get nervous. It's like probably like World War II guys were feeling when the new troops came in from base camp and you're like, oh man, we've been here for like 10 weeks. What are you going to do, man? Like you have no idea what I've been through. How are you going to protect me? Stay behind me. Let me show you how to do this. Mm-hmm. But if we don't allow that to happen and pass it on, I think we run into situations. But if you pay attention to your gut, the opportunity, I think, is that much greater. So I didn't want to get off on a tangent, but I really want to focus on a problem that entrepreneurs are having, which is how do you train someone as an entrepreneur who wants to train you on how to manage them? Well, management is not part of the entrepreneurial journey. Tough knocks are.
And that's where I think a lot of the school age kids and college age kids, they just don't have those opportunities to learn or to fail, in those settings until it's, out in the real world. And like you said, they've lost all that knowledge and all that opportunities of just trying something and learning something new that I'm entitled to this no matter what.
Yeah, and it's the thing. Your friends are probably off getting good jobs. You're going down to learn fish, my first job paid way more than I made by not working there. But I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to work in an office. I'm going to go try this entrepreneurial thing with my dad and try to build a business. And, that him and his partner started. And that's the direction I went. And I was counting food on carts, doing cost analysis, which anyone with a basic math education could do. But I had to start at the bottom to learn the business. And I had to be, no matter who my father was, I still had to be the lowest on the totem pole if I was going to learn and be willing to just deal with all the stuff no one else wanted to do, whether it was data entry or weighing every cup of volume of broccoli versus a volume of cauliflower. I was going to be the one to do it just because that's how I was going to learn. So when someone comes in, like you said, but go on.
Yeah. I think one of the things that there's a gentleman that I've gotten to know over the last handful of years, and he always told me, like, you're just like me, except you had the schooling and I had the street experience, and so like the book smarts versus the street smarts is something that we talk a lot about, and you can study like crazy and you can work really hard, and that can get you really far. There's a certain level of street smarts, to your point and what you did at starting at the lowest level, that is so important, and you can only get it through experience.
Yeah.
And you can only get that kind of street smarts from having bad situations and learning from them. And so, any chance that I get, I'm recommending to young entrepreneurs or people that, they want to take over the world. They want to, create the next best app that, is going to leverage them to this, crazy position and all this other stuff. And it's, they spend so much time planning.
Yeah.
And one of my other friends, one of my best friends actually, He's kind of one of those, and he does very well for himself. And the thing I keep telling him is, look, it doesn't matter what you do, just start doing.
Yeah, just do something.
Yeah.
And do it, and you're gonna have those sort of those trips and falls and mistakes and those kinds of things. That's gonna build up those sort of calluses. It's gonna build up those street smarts. And just in the process of doing things, you don't need to take over the world tomorrow. And the expectations on you are not as high as you think. Your expectations on yourself are way higher than what anybody else puts on you. And so if you can develop this process, if you can develop, if you're able to do the book smarts, and there's so much that you can get from that. But if you can also get the street smarts that comes from experience at a very early age, then there's so much more that you can accomplish, especially even if you put the two together.
Yeah, because if we're talking about street wisdom, it's really the street credibility that gets you true relationships, and people see that you've gone through it. And it's that street wisdom that you've taken. Yes, there's an educational basis for sure. But you're able then to identify financial problems because you've been there. You know the way the money works. I'm living the frickin' life of the broccoli in my case. You're living the life of the fish. Like, you're following what that fish costs with its feed, all the way from the building, the materials, to know what the overhead is, to know what it really takes, what could be saved, what couldn't be saved, what can be shaved, not shaved.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important part. And I think this is probably, speaking of education, one of the things that I found is that I went and worked and was an entrepreneur and did the things I did, and then I went back to graduate school, which gave me a different graduate school experience. Yes, you can regurgitate 1,000 things out of a book, but being able to have experience, go then learn it, and gain other experiences, I think is probably a different experience. And Joe and I have this in common, that we're both Keenan Flagler graduates from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with our MBAs. But I think that's part of what we're talking about also. Like, the entrepreneur knows that life is hard. The entrepreneur knows that you always have to learn no matter how old you get. That an entrepreneur has to think about not only his legacy, but how am I going to divide this amongst my children if by some weird opportunity all of them want to do this? Right. How are they all going to, and by some other weird opportunity, maybe other people in the company want their children to pass down, and then there's multiple generations. And how do we holistically look at that? But it takes the trust of the people, which means you got to have the street credibility,
Yep.
So let's talk about next steps with you guys. I mean, so you're out of the business, you've lost your facility. What do you do now?
Yeah, at that point,
because it's pivot time, right?
Yeah, pivot time.
Do you stay in fish? Do you not stay in fish? I mean, how do you decide?
Yeah, there was so much that we had learned through the first experience, and I would say they were primarily technical. The things that we really focused on as far as what we learned and trying to create a better fish farm. And about that time is actually when I went and got my schooling at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Go Heels.
I know. DeMario, if you're in the building, boo to NC State, man. Down with the Wolfpack. Just so everyone knows, DeMario is like 3 times my size and a Super Bowl winner. So we're just...
We better lock that door.
We better lock the door.
And so in through that process, I'm getting some of the the book smarts, doing the school and going through that MBA program, which was outstanding, and meanwhile also launching Eagles Catch with Paul, and so at that ending, Paul and I were like, well, we still want to do this, we still want to chase this industry, and so we'd gotten together with some other folks, and we kind of come across a group that had done tilapia farming. They had been farmers, they were kind of working on the technology and that kind of stuff. At that point, I still wouldn't consider us experts on the production technology. We've developed it since then, but at that point, we're still wanting to work with someone that knew a lot more than we did.
Absolutely.
And so this group had worked with tilapia, and they kind of had a growth program and everything else that they had done on a smaller scale, a handful of different facilities across the United States. And with everything that we learned through the first process, and we started applying it and looking at what they had done with this, new lens, and we started to really see how what they had been doing really matched up with what our goals and the lessons learned had been from our standpoint. And so we decided to work together with them. And then so at that point, that was kind of the jumping off point for Eagle's Catch.
Just from an educational standpoint, just to quick help the audience along here, what are the differences between growing a tilapia and growing a barramundi? Just to talk about, to help visualize this transition you guys are talking about, because it's a different fish.
Yeah. They're pretty similar in a lot of ways, the barramundi and the tilapia, with a couple exceptions. Number one, tilapia is actually a much hardier fish. In fact, the tilapia originated from the Nile in Egypt. It's called a Niloticus tilapia. And it has been cultured around the world. It's predominant in so many diets across the world. And it was chosen because it's a really hardy animal that grows fast. And it frankly doesn't have much flavor of its own. So if you're a cook out there, this is a blank canvas for you to work with, or to work your magic with. And so however you cook it, and we just, by the way, we just tried a bunch of different recipes here. And there's so many different ways you can take this fish because it's like a blank canvas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so all of those things combined, where it might command less of a price on the retail shelf, but it's more predictable, faster growing, and it still has this kind of wide appeal. There's so many things that can come from that too. There is value there. And the requirements, the sort of environmental requirements, are less. And so we looked at, one of the metrics that we look at is, what is a cost to build a farm as a function of its annual production? And so you look at some of the big aquaculture facilities in the United States or in Europe, where a lot of this was pioneered. And, there's a couple companies that, for salmon, for example, it's around like between $30 and $40 per kilogram investment for salmon. Now, salmon is a premium product, and they command more of a price point, but they also take 3 years to grow. And so, by comparison, that $30 to $40 in investment, we're at $8 with our tilapia. And so, as you look at that, and our time to revenue is 9 months. And so, when you look at the full investment equation, returns are somewhat comparable. But tilapia get 43% of the consumption, but less than 1% of the investment capital. And so, for us, it was kind of a unique opportunity and underappreciated in some of the capital markets that are interested in this space. And I think that was between that and the sort of cultural heritage part of Iowa that identifies with agricultural production on a mass industrial scale, doing it in distributed production models across the state, and with a fish that was extremely hardy that we could have other people grow for us. That was kind of the jumping off point. It's like, this is a really unique opportunity in a fish that is unique for this opportunity, and a place, Iowa, for the same opportunity.
So talk to me, Paul, about now how you guys, we've talked about the plant, and so you're obviously now into a new fish facility. So Eagle's Catch has decided to find a piece of land. How do you guys, do you go with the same tanks you used before? Do you decide you're going to build them on your own? I mean, how do you guys decide how you're going to do this?
Once we had committed to sell our facility, we went ahead and sent Joe and then our fish manager at the time out across the United States looking for different species of fish, different tank systems, different buildings to house this new facility. And we came across an outfit in Colorado that had a greenhouse facility with a tank system that was different from the one that we were using before, a lot more efficient in their water usage, and able to do larger volumes of fish in a facility. So we took on that opportunity and started to go out through friends and family and do a fundraise. So we went through the whole process of raising money to start building this facility. That we had the technical expertise coming along with the building package that we'd
Absolutely.
be able to get knowledge from, and then also on the aquaculture side, technical knowledge there as well that would be able to help manage us through the startup and into raising tilapia. A lot of people say you got to kill 1 million fish before you're a fish farmer. Well, we brought the people in that had already killed the 1 million fish, so we didn't have to. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that was a nice opportunity for us to grow with less risk involved in a startup. So that was our first steps of getting into it. Going out and doing fundraising in rural Iowa. Like I said, it was a lot of friends and family, but it was a lot of, I would say about 95% of our investment pool is related to agriculture. And I'd say the other 5% are maybe one generation removed from the farm or agriculture. So there's a lot of people that know and understand what livestock agriculture is about and how we want and need to go through the roads of bumps and bruises, but the end game is to make a great product that is very sellable.
And we've talked about water usage, and I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about what now happens with the waste, because there's fish waste. It's obviously very high in its potential to be fertilizer, and you guys are working on that, so I don't want to lose track on that. I wanted to keep talking, but I just want to make sure that we talk about that as well with you guys, because I think it's an important piece of what we're talking about, a more holistic glue to the agriculture, including the fish as being part of what actually happens. And there was once a free cow, so go ahead.
Yeah, on the fish wastewater, the nice opportunity there, it's not like a hog manure where it's high in N, P, and K, where you can knife that into the soil and grow your corn and soybeans, mainly corn. But what the fish wastewater has is a biostimulant aspect to it. It is something that as you use it on your leafy greens or your tomatoes or a lot of vegetable type products, whatever it has either in the soil or fertilizer that you put on it, it enhances that. It makes that plant utilize it better. And that's something that we need to capture that product to be able to go out and use it as added value product for our fish farm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe the Indians used to put dead fish across their farms and sow it into their fields just for that reason, to keep the nutrients and the efficiency in the soil to grow bigger crops. I mean, they just knew it through tribal knowledge.
Yeah, yep. And that's something that we're working on. We want to make sure that we raise the fish. Tilapia is our main objective, but there's so many other opportunities for us to add value to the fish farm. Wastewater, the say composting dead fish. There's a lot of opportunities there that we're getting into and seeing the value to it.
All right, so let's talk about size of the facility, because now you've got to build a bigger facility. So let's talk about size, tanks, how many fish, where do you go from here? What's the goals?
Yeah, so the facility is about 3.8 acre greenhouse.
Wow.
And so it is housing 142 tanks across the facility. So it has a nursery and has a grow outside. And so the nursery is getting those fish to about 100 grams, and then we take them from 100 to 800, which is the market weight, or that's about 1.5 to 1.6 pounds. And so that is that production model in a lot of ways mimics other sort of agricultural production in the state. And this facility, which we broke ground in 2017, and we built that farm out over the last couple of years. We had our first sale happen in 2019. 2020 was just a whirlwind of a year for us, as this was our big breakout year, and we ran smack face first into a pandemic.
Yeah.
And so we didn't quite meet our own expectations in 2020, but things are slowly returning, and the end capacity of this farm is going to be roughly 5 million pounds of fish per year.
Oh, that's
which
awesome.
puts it at one of the largest fish farms in North America. One of, not the largest, but one of them. And our expansion from there is going to be with Iowa farmers and other people that want to bring home that next generation, continue the heritage. And growing tilapia is a very great process. And one of the things that we didn't talk about was the net water turnover. So one of our company goals is actually to produce the most water neutral and carbon neutral forms of animal protein. How we're able to achieve that in at least in Iowa, we don't have a shortage of water. We don't irrigate. We tile to get water away from our fields, which is in contrast to so many other places in the world where they're constantly having to irrigate and get water out too. And they even think that the wars of the future are not going to be fought over oil. They're going to be fought over water as one of the most scarce resources.
Absolutely.
Remember we talked about how between now and 2050, we have to almost double food production with less land and less water and less inputs. And so we look at this need to use less water, even though in the state of Iowa we're not constrained, but it's really kind of a global perspective of, with this being one of our top constrained resources going into the future, we have to lower the water use as a input of this production. And then from carbon standpoint, there's a lot that we can talk about there too, but that's really kind of our sustainability mission, and what we're really trying to accomplish again is the most water neutral and carbon neutral form of animal protein.
One of the real learning experiences we got from Buckeye Fish to Eagles Catch was our water filtration system. We were using about 10% of our water every day, and that was getting flushed out as wastewater to our lagoon system. Where this new system that we're using now, we're anywhere from 2 to 4% of the water is either sent out as wastewater or evaporated, because we're in a greenhouse.
Yeah.
So evaporation going back in the atmosphere. So those things right there, just with scalability, we're saving a lot more water than what we would have on the first initial site. So
there's advancements to be made yet too.
True, totally true. And
Yeah.
and so we think, when Joe's saying we want to be the most water neutral protein, well, if you've got, I raise cattle, I raise sheep, pigs, they all drink water. They consume it, and then it goes to urine as far as waste. Whereas the fish, we've got a lot of water sitting there, but they're swimming in it. They're not utilizing it, and we can recirculate that water over and over and over again, and not have to flush it down as wastewater.
I think one of the things I particularly like about it is with fish, you're able to grow them. I think there's, like you said, you don't have to use the water to actually consume, the animal doesn't consume it. You get a waste product that benefits the farm. I mean, we've talked about utilization and stuff like that. I think holistically, you're still using better usage of water, and it's still better cleaning and usage of the wastewater than having the same fish waste just go out into the ocean. If we're going to be honest, I mean, there's enough fish out there and waste, whatever, but if we're going to use it, we should put it back into the soil to start rebuilding the organic soil and putting carbon back into the soil also, and things like that we can do with it, and enhance the grasses, even if it's just grazing, and so on and so forth, on the energy input into our animals. And so this is where it's like, it's not only the things that we eat, it's also the things that eat what we eat, or whatever, vice versa, and that we eat what they eat, basically. And it's how do we do all that? So I think part of it is what you guys are onto, and what Iowa's always done very well is adjust to that. And even though they have water and could build 1 million power plants and have enough land to probably use whatever in electricity they want, they still use wind. They're still benefiting the farmers. They're trying to make sure the generations go on, that land's protected, that it stays what it is, because the reality is there's not many places like Iowa that can produce the way Iowa produces on a world scale, global scale. So, you know, it's funny how we think about things on security and all that, and the things that we do, but we eat up our farmland like it's, you know, like it's this morning's cereal. So,
you know, to that point, I think wise guy once told me that the process of raising animals is adding value to feedstuffs. And so in Iowa, we're a big epicenter of the feedstuffs. And with fish, we're converting that into a usable protein very efficiently. 1.3 pounds of feed gets you a pound of protein in return. And I think the whole animal ag industry is under pressure from different groups. You know, it's why there's a movement towards, you know, plant-based proteins, synthetic meats, and those kinds of things, and, you know, vegan and vegetarian lifestyles. There's a lot of different reasons why people go to that sort of lifestyle. I'm not going to discredit that at all. One of the criticisms is that animals are inefficient at converting feedstuffs, and why can't we just consume field corn? Well, you can't. Your body can't digest it. But you know, from our standpoint, we're adding value to feedstuffs, things that are easy to grow, and trying to utilize those nutrients all the way through. And so with fish, converting that 1.3 pounds of feed into a pound of protein in return, there is still some waste, that 30%, that 0.3. But then what you do with that effluent stream or nutrient stream that is coming out the other side, you can continue to add value to that original feed stuff. And so people are utilizing that as a fertilizer for other feedstuffs, or for, you know, it's been really good for like vegetable growth. Like Paul talked about the biostimulant, making better use of the ingredients that are in front of these plants. So even though it is an animal protein process, we're still capturing all of that feedstuff value. And that's really kind of a great starting point for this sort of carbon neutrality argument. That, hey, this is like one of the most environmentally conscious foods that you can do, even though it's an animal protein. Oh, by the way, you know, our fish systems are the most efficient there are, and in Iowa, over 40% of our electricity comes from wind energy. So the carbon footprint of one of our, you know, one of our fish is so much less than any other food stuff. And I think that's really, you know, we're still working on proving out those numbers, and we're working with some experts to compare one protein to the next, even vegetables to what we're doing, and say this is a really great product that is net neutral on the environment.
And I want to pause here, because I think on a scale, let's talk about what you're talking about in food and the importance of food and different nutrition. One of the things that happens is you're growing the stuff that's fed to the fish in the area that you're growing the fish, right? So it's not moving very far, right? Then the fish are processed relatively central to the United States, which we've talked about before, which makes them move generally the one way. They're not trucks back and forth. They're not hitting multiple spots. We generally try to move them in one direction from that point based on the model. Why the United States just happened, Iowa was lucky. Again, why U.S. went so up during war times. We could produce a lot of food on a lot of land and push it out to the ports on either side to support war efforts on both sides of the country. We know that that's the way it is, yet we still refuse to see things that way. We think that, oh, let's just plant-based protein everything. Well, yes, we can grow a lot of plant-based protein, but what happens to all the nutrients that we can't really get? I don't care how many vitamins, how many whatever, it's still got to pass through an animal to get to us.
Right.
You know, so I can argue a million different ways that you can get it other ways, but still nature designed the animal to pass it through it to us being at the food chain where we are, and we could eat a lot of different varieties. It's just we've got to accept that they're there and that there was once a free cow. And so that being said, what are next steps for your business? I mean, you've gotten this far. You now have it. Where do you have to go? I mean, we've started talking about. I mean, it's not only farm animals. We're talking about whole utilization, but now even a 1.6 pound tilapia. So let's talk about some of that stuff, utilizing animals. And then what are next steps for your business?
So for us to grow, we know there's three costs that you have to lower to reach price parity with imported product. So to your point on transportation, most of the seafood in the United States, in fact, 3/4 of it coming from China, that product is being shipped literally from the other side of the world. So you look at distance, miles traveled, that's a huge cost.
Yeah.
And so you've got three costs to reach price parity. Now, our cost of production is higher today, but we're going to continue to lower that through vertical integration and utilizing what's in front of us. So it's feed, labor, and transportation. Being close to the consumer in the center of the United States, being close to the feedstuffs, and being close to the the people that are producing everything that goes into that supply chain,
Yeah.
that lowers your transportation cost immediately. Number two, labor. So with us developing these farms kind of with an IoT mindset, so Internet of Things, integrating these farms with a software platform that lowers the labor requirement is one of our big time goals, but also the actual physicality that goes into these farms. It's not as physically demanding of a job as other forms of agriculture, and so it actually opens up a whole different labor base that isn't even recognized under current workforce, as a current workforce. So in the state of Iowa, we're very traditional communities. So we're talking about homemakers. We're talking about stay-at-home moms or dads. We're talking about that are involved in agriculture. We're talking about people that maybe aren't within that workforce. Now we can put them to work and make a big economic benefit for their community. The last big cost for us to lower is our feed cost. We're shipping from Louisiana, and we've been pretty clear with the folks that supply us with feed. It's like, look, we're paying $900 a ton for feed, and we want to get that down to probably around $700 a ton, and we can do that just by nature where we are, because our neighbors are raising the corn and soy and the byproducts from chicken and hog production. We're adding now a new market for your product, and we're going to feed it to our fish, and we're going to get closer to that consumer, and so we're able to mitigate so much transportation, the carbon footprint that comes with the transportation, the cost that comes with that as well, and so there's a lot of advantages there. So over the last 8 years that we've been in the business, we've learned so much about production technology, marketing, everything that goes into raising fish and doing it efficiently, and we want to put that to work, and we want to get that sort of heritage mindset. Like Paul said, he's looking for these opportunities to bring his next generation home to the family farm, and there's so many people in the state of Iowa that want to do that too. And so we're actually doing design development on smaller farms that family farmers can invest in, provide new economic opportunities in rural communities, bring home that next generation, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to bring home the next generation, because there's not enough land to feed more mouths.
Yeah.
There's not enough income to feed another family that's coming in to the family farm. So if we can provide these sort of opportunities to them, and we would supply them with everything that we had learned from the production technology. Here's the tanks to use. Here's the building. We'll come and build it. All you have to do is fund and operate it. And by the way, we're going to buy the product on the back end. You're not going to have to worry about your own marketing plan and everything else. And we find that family farmers are incredibly encouraged and interested in this, because it resembles so much the pork and chicken models from a business standpoint. It's like invest and produce, and it fits in culturally with what we do in rural America as well.
And you don't have to worry about it. We handle the brand, the marketing, and we handle the
Exactly.
market out the door, and you guys grow for us, and we.
Yep.
And it's, I mean, a lot of people do it. It's a franchise model, and a franchisee, they're investing the money, they're building the facility, the brand's getting built. These are the right type of models for things to make change. So I like what you guys are doing, and I think the whole point is to not only benefit yourself as a business, but if you're rooting for other people, it helps grow your business. I think
Absolutely.
success comes to you more easily. I think you gain more people who support you, and I think you attract better partners or business partners, whether it's vendors or sources, by doing those type of things. So, I mean, this is pretty phenomenal, right? So now you've got this concept. So, I mean, we've talked about tilapia. We've talked about you guys are starting to value add to it. We've talked about, I mean, what there's process for the skins. I mean, dog treats. I mean, let's really dive into sort of how do you utilize a tilapia?
So the big thing about a tilapia is it's not a real high yielding fish. We'll see about 30% of the fish is fillet that's consumable on your protein side. So you got 70% of that fish that is what they call offal. I mean, every other piece of the fish, but you can utilize that. If we would manufacture or put up a processing plant, we can capture all that other product, that 70%, and use it in a lot of different ways. We could use it in fertilizer, we could use it in pet foods, in healthcare. I know they've used tilapia skins for burn victims.
Yeah.
You can use it in cosmetics. They've used the scales for glitter, collagen, a lot of other things that can be utilized. So we can capture that value of that fish and use that as an added value product. So there's opportunities there that we'd be able to, right now we're having some fish custom processed for us. So we have to pay for them to do it, and then we do not receive any of the added value product. They receive that themselves. So it's something that we're needing to do going forward to make that vertical integration possible.
Yeah.
To that point, there's a lot of value-added products that we can get out of that. Paul talked about some of the baseline ones, but there's things that you can do, like with the fish skins. I think it was briefly mentioned that you can make dog treats out of the fish skins. We've talked about, fish rinds, much like pork rinds, but made from the fish skins. Paul talked about the burn victims that use tilapia skins as a bandage. Boiling the rest of the fish, and you can make fish stock. There's so many other products that you'd be able to use and turn that last, 66% to 70% of that fish and into usable products. One of the things we did earlier today is, with some other parts of the fish, we made fish burgers.
Yeah.
And, the fillet is not the only part of that fish that's usable. And in a lot of cases, in other, animal ag protein, what you do with the co-products or the byproducts makes the difference whether you're making money or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's a lot of margin that is potential for that, and we want to be a part of that development of those co-products that's really going to make this take this to the next level.
And so I mean I love this because we're talking about the animals. We're talking about it's not just being a fish farmer. It's how does it fit into your family farm as part of to balance out things. Which again, if you look in all directions, when nature takes you where we're supposed to find the balance, it's exactly that. I mean, financially, we have to balance it.
Yep.
Farming for the land, we have to balance it. We need to, and for carbon and for the environment, we need to balance it. So it's like you're farming. It's these are the steps. Families come back to farms. The farms become multiple businesses, really business units, just because they're in multiple things. You see it where people are getting more into the ones that are surviving are finding niches and things like that. And tilapia is one of them in this case, or fish farming in general, added on to your traditional agriculture. It's not one or the other. That's why I like what you guys are doing in your model. And I think your experience and your street credibility and street wisdom adds to that so much, where people coming into the fish farming or aquaculture, they don't have that knowledge of like there is a traditional farming model. Yes, it is constantly being tweaked and grown and bettered through technology or different things, but there's also the ability to add more. It's not, it just has to be a land animal. It's not, it just has to be a row crop.
Right.
Or whatever, or just anything, you name it. We're starting to see that there's creativity there. So I appreciate you guys coming in a lot. And so as we wrap up, I mean, what do you guys, I mean, if you could each pick like 3 or 4 things that you thought were the most valuable piece for you guys in your personal journey, I mean, really, what would it be in terms of growth, or something that you could pass on to your kids or anyone that was being an entrepreneur that, you know, they still need to go through? But if you wish you could have someone learn something and save it, what would it be? Save the time.
I guess one of the biggest things is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to fail. You know, don't be afraid. You know, I've talked to many people that, oh, I wouldn't have tried that. And it's like, you don't know. You know, it goes back to my football. If I was a walk-on, and if I had other high school teammates that could have played.
Yeah.
You know, but they didn't take that chance. And I don't want my kids to look back 20 years from now and go, I wish I would have tried this, or I wish I would have invested in this, or you know, taking the chance is I think is a huge deal for me.
Yeah.
And I want my kids to be confident enough to be able to, you know, research, be able to make a good decision. But once you research and think, yes, this is a good opportunity, go for it. You know, make that opportunity happen. And if you fail, well, pick yourself back up and look for the next thing. So I think that's one of those things that, you know, I'm afraid that this next generation that's in high school and college, you know, not all of them, but some of them have that. And some of the people that I grew up with had that opportunity, but they didn't jump at it. And I think that's one for me that I hope I pass on to my kids.
What I would say probably is along a similar strain as what Paul said, and I think I've mentioned it once before in this podcast. Just go out and do something, and you know, and make a transaction. I don't care if it's, you know, selling lemonade or if it's, you know, whatever it is that you want to do. Get out and do it, and through that process, just go into it with the mindset of just learn, apply. And, you know, that was the recipes for success in his football career, was just go out and do it, learn, apply. And that's why he was so successful in that endeavor, and why, you know, we think we're going to continue to be successful in the fish space. And so, you know, if there's a college student or a high school student that's out there that is out there listening, it's really, or anybody at any age, just go out and do it. And start to develop, you know, the sort of competencies that come with it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it comes from confidence, but from experience. Yep. And I think if I were to really take it full circle, scarred or wounded, you know, battle ground tested entrepreneur can sense when someone else is making the mistakes that weren't battle tested. Now, we don't know everything, but I also know what you guys said is know what you don't know. Which I think is more important, like also than sometimes entrepreneurs, they don't realize what they don't know. And so they try to do it all themselves, and they don't realize, hey, I don't know this. I need to find a partner or an expert, or go myself and get the expertise.
Yeah.
And I think that unless you make the jump, you never realize really what you don't know. They're all ideas. And there's a million napkin entrepreneurs in the world, if that's what you want to call it, and give it an entrepreneur title, even though by definition it's not one. It's just, if you're really going to be one, you're really going to do it, it's going to hurt. Yeah. And it's going to hurt bad sometimes.
Well, and I've had a family member that he's got a million of these napkin ideas, and I think half of them would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
But he just never took that second step, and it's too bad, because it's something that is, you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda, you know, and that hurts. You know?
And to Joe's point, just turn over the rock. I don't know. I mean, otherwise the rock's just gonna follow you everywhere.
Yep. There's kind of two sayings that I kind kind of try to live by. It's, number one, test small, fail small, win big.
Yeah.
In that case, it's just go out and do something and work through those processes and learn. And there's so many things that you can apply if you just go out and do. So sorry, I had one other. I forget what that was, and maybe I'll remember.
No, but I'm gonna sort of tie on to it. I mean, the thing is even in the business that I'm in, and we have clients come in, like, it's hard to bet and get into something with someone who doesn't have any experience, because you could be the luckiest person ever, theoretically, but opportunity meets experience, which meets preparedness, in my opinion. And so I'm a firm believer in this. You have to go get the experience, even if it's working for someone else to start the credibility, or interviewing other people. Books and stuff aren't enough. Coaching, mentoring, and we think everything now happens behind a screen, or we can do it over a screen, and we don't need face-to-face interaction. I just don't even know how you do anything. Like, I don't think I was told to go on the road here and there at the beginning of my career, but now it's not even an option. Like, Deborah and I don't even think about it as humans. I don't think most people in food service partners anymore think about it at the level you guys obviously don't think about it. You're here.
Yep.
This is what we need to do. And because you get over that first fear, you almost don't have, your fears in life become less. And it's almost, okay, like, you're afraid, you're stuck there. I don't know why. I remember being there, but I'm not quite sure why. But you can't get stuck there, because, like, you need momentum.
Yeah.
And momentum is falling and bouncing and learning to pick yourself back up.
Yeah.
Like on a horse farm, you get thrown off. It's best for the horse and best for you to get back on, unless you're dying or the horse is dying. But get back on. It's best for everyone. Like, respect-wise for each other, respect for yourself, self-confidence. The horses needing to know that you're okay, that it can be trusted, that things get messed up, that it's okay. Like, there's all these things that we learn, and my tribal knowledge could be different than someone else's tribal knowledge. But if I know what I don't know, I can now gain more experience from people also. So
that did. So I did remind myself the quote, but one of the things I was going to say was, you're never going to know everything.
Yeah.
And until you do, so it's to Paul's point, just jump in, do it, and you won't know everything until you get into it. And so the quote that I was gonna relay was, asking the right questions is much harder than finding the right answers.
Yeah.
And so trying to find what those questions are, and I have to force myself into so many situations of trying to ask more questions, ask questions that I don't even know are the correct ones to ask.
Yeah.
But going through that again is finding the right questions is harder than finding the right answers.
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. And because, again, like, if you don't ever do it, you don't know what could be missing or wrong, how you're ever going to, and you're not going to run a successful business. Just like the opposite, if you try to control one part of your business too much, you lose track of the other parts and go on the ground. So it's, where do you find the balance? But I think what you guys have done is found a balance between, how do we grow, what's financially responsible, how do we get a proof of concept and then build upon it. To your point, small, we've got a proof of concept, we know we can do this. Let's keep expanding now to the next levels and start vertically integrating while also horizontally integrating, which is what, if any entrepreneur really knows, the only way to gain value is to spread it out of the margin. And that's the food stuffs that we're talking about. You need to be more part of it. And that's where, keeping things close and stuff matter. Lastly, I have something I really want to ask you guys, and start to talk about, which is tilapia the end? I mean, is the diversity of the fish now part of the plan for Eagle's Catch? I mean, and once you build a tilapia system, what comes next?
Yeah. So there's, with different species, there's a lot of different complexities that go along with each one. comparing a shrimp to a tilapia to a salmon, it's like comparing chickens to hogs to
Yeah, absolutely.
a giraffe. So there's a lot of different biological requirements that go along with each. And so tilapia is one of the few fish, well, probably the only fish that has been farmed successfully in these types of systems for multiple decades.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we said, all right, let's start with a fish that we know works, that we know that we can grow and we can sell and have a positive start to our business. Eventually, there's going to come a time where you're the number one seafood product in America is shrimp, and so it's kind of the big elephant in the room,
Yeah.
and the big opportunity. But they're much more difficult to grow, and especially at scale. And so we're spending our time cutting our teeth and growing an industry built around tilapia, which is in its own right an incredible opportunity. And we keep a very close eye at the sort of technologies and production that goes into raising shrimp, as well as salmon, as well as a handful of other species that could be big opportunities in the United States. And so we keep a close eye, but we feel really good about our opportunities with tilapia for at least the next 5 years. But we're always going to keep an open eye to the production opportunities on their species.
And I think that's it, right? First, you gotta get good at what you're good at, and then and get that working right, and then it's time to make the next entrepreneurial leap. And then maybe after that one, maybe it's you go from one species and getting that right to we'll launch two.
Yeah.
But it has to your point, you got to start off and build the bridge and then cross it. I think often people would try to jump into multiple things at once, or try to bite off more than they can chew. And I think that causes problems, honestly. And I think we're seeing a lot of aquaponics go into tilapia and other types of fish too, as part of their aquaculture process, for the aquaponics. So it's interesting to see how all that's coming along, and may work for you guys as well, and and nationwide relationships and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty cool where you guys are, and I think the vision of what we need to do with fish in terms of bringing it on shores to complement the existing agriculture makes sense. It's part of our system. It's not something that needs to be, we don't run out with bow and arrows and shoot our cows anymore, like really.
Right.
So this is not to say fishing doesn't matter, because we still got to catch a lot of species that we can't grow. But what it is saying is that, hey, what are the things that we can grow on shores over time, and really take a real view at it, and then what are the things that still need to be out there. And as humans, hopefully when we're gone, probably by the time it happens, we start to realize what that balance really looks like.
I would love to see my kids be able to raise tuna.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that be cool to be in central Iowa and have a tuna farm?
I know.
I think that would be awesome.
Uh-huh.
So there's opportunities.
And I agree. I think what we're seeing in the technologies and the water and being able to conserve it and wiping out water for outdoor agriculture in places that don't have water, it's getting a little, we've got to be smarter about the way we do it and where we move where and how we complement things. Or once we get water to that place, how do we keep it there?
Right.
Versus just flushing it away.
And be done.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so I think these are all part of those solutions. If we really look at it as humans, it needs to fit into nature's natural pattern. Yes, we're the highest intelligence on the planet, but it's not to use it to disrupt the system that's already been made. We're okay, we don't understand the intricacies of nature total, but what we can do is harness them as humans to make them work in a way that's beneficial to both humans, so we can survive and they can survive and the planet can survive. And that's the answer. And pieces like you guys are doing, and why I want to really do 2 episodes with you guys, is it fits into what we're talking about. Naturally, we know that we need diversity in our diets, on proteins, on fruits and vegetables, on minerals, on seeds, on you name it, nuts. It's in order, and it doesn't need to be constantly every day, but over cyclically, that's okay to do. And tilapia is part of that solution. and so is plant-based protein. It's just not the solution. It's just how do we balance it all to work together on the farm, so that's the stuff coming out
Yep.
that while we're buying it, it's all benefiting, like you guys said.
Absolutely. You know, and to that final point, and not to backtrack in our conversation, but it's also necessary. Raising fish on land is actually necessary for the health of our oceans as well.
Yeah.
And, 93% of the wild stocks are either overfished or maximally sustainably fished. We're not getting any more fish from the ocean. In fact, it's going to start declining. And so bringing fish on land is a very necessary part. The sort of practices that are used in ocean caught fish are not healthy for our oceans. And so, like you mentioned, there's so much from a holistic standpoint of our diets and of agricultural production systems. This is a scientific process that we're trying everything from lowering stress on the animals to create a better product on the back end, to creating a diet for consumers that gets all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and nutrients that they need in a variety of ways that allows our bodies to best thrive under the next 30 years. Again, that we're going to have to produce twice the amount of agricultural product with less land, less water, and less inputs.
Yeah.
And so the sort of agricultural challenge that is ahead of us is immense, and it's going to take the best and brightest minds to figure out how the heck we are going to feed all these people that are coming even just in the next 30 to 50 years.
Yeah, and I think and the reality is if we really take a step back as humans and understand our food sources and our supply chains and the way things move, and that one, they need to move less. So fishing boats, burning fuel, just okay. So not that I'm against fishing, but what I'm trying to say here is there has to be a different way of doing it. And maybe there's fish farms out in the ocean, stuff like that eventually run efficiently without the harm and stuff that's going on. I don't know. But I don't see it yet. I see it as we got to move to land first and perfect it and get what we can on land to start releasing some of that pressure. Also bringing in those alternative food sources into our diets for food security, not only as the United States, but seriously as a global environment. And for the future, if we really care about humans and we really care about passing things on, like this is something we got to think about. And when we're looking at it, it's tweaking a lot of knobs across a lot of things, and not everyone wins. But how do you do what's best for the environment? How do you do what's best for the humans? How do you do what's best for the animals and the food and the families, and keep people and weigh all the economics, all the water, all the byproduct, the pollution, the planet? Really, it's nature has a way. It's just it's harnessing it on the farms like we've talked about, and being open to, hey, maybe I'm not just a cow farmer, and maybe I'm not just a sheep farmer. Maybe I have to be an entrepreneur, or what really a farmer is, which is I need to diversify myself as much as possible for myself, for the market, for the environment, and for the consumers. And it's now getting the consumers to realize it. But what you guys have provided is a spark in order to do that, and a way for people to do it on land that makes economic sense. And so how do you argue with it? How do you how do you attract more people? You build something better that makes more sense, that's hard to argue with. And if you look at holistically what you guys have done, all the tweaking is part of a larger picture that makes sense. Yes, this is major what you're doing in and of itself just with the tilapia, but as it filters into the whole thing, it's a huge impact. Mm-hmm. Because it's not the ripple of one thing, it's the whole food chain and how we're rippling it right now. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that the amount of cauliflower and broccoli and stuff that we get from China now as a country, also, it's not only Mexico and Canada. Mm-hmm. We've literally, the more farmland we consume and the less we diversify, and the more we don't focus on keeping the family farms around and doing some of that stuff we're talking about more than bouncing up and down in those commodities just because it makes economic sense, but also farming sense, also environmental sense.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and like you said, in honesty, I think fish wastewater complemented with already the animal fertilizer products that are going in there from land animals, it's a way to rebuild soil quickly, and it's a way to take things like grass-fed or grass-finished animals in these type of trends to maybe get more energy in them to grow them like we're doing with other energy sources. I don't know, but theoretically in my mind, what I know about energy and getting it into animals, it's possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
And the less we can be less dependent on other countries, the better off we're going to be in the future.
yeah.
I think that's across the whole spectrum in every country.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why you have China that has, protectionist policies around their agricultural production. I think that's smart on not only their practice, but on our practices, because food security is national security.
Yeah.
And if there's a breakdown in trade, it really puts all of the countries at risk of food security risk. And so, being a part of that conversation, I think, has been really outstanding experience both for Paul and I and with you here now too.
Yeah, and I'll just have a little fun, and we'll go really far out. 500,000 years down the road, whatever it is, and we're at some crisis globally. The only way to replicate what we have is to be able to take a whole farm and to be able to contain whatever it is that we have in an environment that's containable.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I can't think about how else we would do it. Maybe someone else down the road will have a brighter mind. But in us, where we go, we need to bring our food. And in order to do it in any efficient manner, we have to be able to grow as much in that circle as possible and have as many people doing the same circle. Even if it supports the urban people that don't farm, it's multiple farms doing it in wherever it ends up being, because without it, we can't survive. So I'm just a little bit like, if I were to really think far out, I can't see how we don't sustain life that way if we had to.
Yep.
So weirdly, deeply, crazily, to really get the sci-fi guys out there. But I don't think it's far-fetched. I mean, it's all moving carbon around and stuff like that. And
it takes a lot of, I'd say, sort of local expertise in certain commodities or certain products. In the standpoint of Iowa, like, we're the top, pork producing state, we're the top corn producing state, and it's because, as well as a handful of other commodities, but having that sort of local expertise, we're able to increase yields, we're able to do things that create more product, because we're hyper focused on it. And so, whereas the West Coast and East Coast probably has more exposure, like in vegetable production and those kinds of things.
yeah, absolutely.
In the state of Iowa, those things, those kinds of products actually make sense to be closer to that consumer. Commoditized corn, soybeans, pork, those kinds of things transform their the way that they are presented multiple times before they reach an end consumer. And so, being in a state with only 3 million people, 1/4 the size of just New York City is an entire state. Our demand is not there, but it's it has to exchange product forms so many times. And so, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to do a similar thing in fish farming, and still reach those consumers and doing it in a place where it really limits the transportation and really limits the carbon footprint because of this sort of local expertise in these different product forms.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Can give us again where we can find you guys on Facebook. Actually, one more thing. Paul, your name, oh my God, are you like a Viking or something? I was going to say last names like I do during podcasts, but there's like Stuttgart, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's a Viking. He's a Viking from
Norway.
Straight from Norway, yeah. I was like, oh man, I thought Bizzarro was going to be hard. I was like, but I thought your name was awesome, and I'm like, it must be like a Viking or something in the middle of Iowa. So
The crazy thing, the V sounds like a W, so it's just Skartvedt, tweet like a bird.
Skartvedt.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but the V throws everybody off.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not how it looks like when you spell it, though.
No.
You know.
No.
I know. It's a crazy thing. Well, thank you guys again. And where can we find you guys on Instagram and Facebook and stuff?
Yeah, you can find both Paul Skartvedt and myself, Joe Sweeney, and Eagles Catch on Facebook and it's at Eagles-Catch. And then you can also find our website at www.eagles-catch.com.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it, actually, and I look forward to maybe doing episode 3 in a few months and see how things are going. So,
Be great.
Look forward
thanks,
to it.
guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.